Hello.
Hey.
Actually, before we start, I wanted to complain. You know, I showed you that wicked burn mark I had?
Mm-hmm.
So, listeners, I burnt myself making scones because I was baking in a crop top. PSA, be careful if you bake in a crop top or cook in general. And I just ran the pan right smack in my belly. And it is right, like, where my belly runs into my desk. And so I just have to, like, keep leaning back awkwardly, like, oh, nope, can't do that.
Ouch.
Yeah, it's a little unpleasant. That's okay. Maybe I will have a cool scar.
You can make up a cool story as to how you got it.
Yeah, I'll be like, I got into a fucking duel. No worries.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's get going. Today, we are here to talk about part 2 of our food and capitalism episodes. This basically will cover everything else that's in Omnivore's Dilemma by Michael Pollan. So if you want to go ahead and stop now and go back and listen to the first one if you haven't, or whatever, that's fine. So to start this out, I kind of wanted to do a little backtracking and talk about like the title of the book and kind of the main thesis this book posits. We didn't get too into it last time, but I think it kind of helps frame some of the other stuff that he writes about. So the title, The Omnivore's Dilemma, is the idea that because humans and other species, like rats notably, can eat lots of different things, you know, plants, animals, minerals, fungi, we have to spend more time and energy figuring out what to eat. There's a lot of debate over just when human brains like evolved to be bigger, but a lot of it points towards like our first forays into cooking and eating meat. And so this whole relationship with food takes up a lot of brain space. And so Pollan kind of further posits that even though basic evolution covers a lot about how we, you know, actually know what is good to eat, you know, what's a poison mushroom, you know, what's good for you and what's not good for you, based on like super basic factors of like, oh, we're predisposition to like sweets, you know, we dislike bitterness, which often is a result of like toxins in a plant that can kill you. We are naturally repulsed by like rotting meat and like eating other humans and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So like we have those basic guidelines, but he posits that beyond that, it's much more difficult for Americans because he thinks that we lack a like secure enough food culture. And so we are especially susceptible to fads like dieting and just trendy foods, and then also marketing and that whole sector.
Is he, when he says America lacks a secure food culture, does that just mean it's kind of, it's uncertain for a lot of people where they're getting their food? Is that what he means, or?
No, he's not using it in terms of like food security. He means it in terms of like a stable culture. Like, let me give an example. Like in contrast, a lot of scientists and like nutritionists and people like that are very confused by what's called the French paradox, which is, you know, French people as a culture eat a lot of butter and cheese and wine and like, you know, fucking pate, things that are very usually not good for you. But when you look at like their health, they generally are pretty healthy people. And so there's a lot of confusion and head scratching over like, okay, is it like the types of things that they're eating? Is it how much? Pollan kind of posits that it's a cultural thing. Apparently in French culture, you don't ever really eat alone. You don't typically go back for seconds. It's a very like drawn out, a meal takes a while and you're like, you know, it takes longer and it's like an affair, you know, like it's a whole to do.
Yeah. And plus at the end of it, you got to walk or bike back home. You know, you probably walk 20 times more than the average American does. Because your cities are built differently.
Exactly. And we were watching this show, this ridiculous show about toddlers in Japan. And it's like they go on errands by themselves. And like me and Gray just kept being like, how can they, like everyone was watching it, like our whole family was like, how can they do this? And it's like, it's because they have the infrastructure for public transportation and like a community.
Yeah, just plain walkable cities and stuff.
Yeah, I think that's huge. Pollan, I think, kind of goes too hard the other way. Like, he definitely gets into, you know, some fat shaming territory and some just, like, general crankiness about the whole thing. Like, man, it's cool. You know, like, he gets very judgy.
His thrust is food versus, like, other aspects of living healthily, right? Or living in a balanced way.
Yes. I mean, he also talks shit about like, I don't know, like he was like, well, yeah, we're still like really fat and unhealthy and all that stuff. And he does mention, I think, that we're more sedentary, things like that. But yeah, you're right. His main thrust is that it's the food culture that we're lacking. And the way he compares it is like he talks about like a quote unquote average American family in terms of like how a marketing department would look at them and all the different segmentations of that market of, oh, now we can get so-and-so driving in their car on the way to work. And then they're in a hurry, so they like grab a prepackaged meal for that. And like, it's all very separate and very convenient. And to me, I look at that and I'm like, instead of griping about the culture of like why we're okay with that, why aren't we grappling with the system that forces you to make those decisions?
I think that's a good point. That would be a better avenue of critique. Like you said, he doesn't necessarily go in a leftist direction so much as just kind of point out problems,
Yeah, and I think he does do a little bit of the work. Like he correctly points out that because of this, what he would call a lack of food culture or a lack of defined food culture, marketing departments and corporations very readily step up to fill that role for us. And like, think about how often health advice changes to like, oh, red meat is bad for you. Oh, like red wine is bad for you. Just kidding. Maybe those things are good. Like, like every year it switches.
Yeah. The coffee,
yeah, that's
coffee,
another one.
wine, napping.
Yeah, everything is like either going to make you live forever or give you cancer, basically. The food industry in general, like they do that too, of like, oh, carbs are terrible. Oh no, carbs are good. Like they don't fucking know. But the food industry is better off if we all have a collective anxiety about what to eat so they can market us new products. Because if you remember last time, we talked about how the natural rate of growth for the food industry is 1% to match the population rate. And they don't want that. They want to create new markets.
Yeah. And now in this phase of capitalism, maybe the only market to expand in, I mean, we're already seeing that with NFTs and everything, is just, it's your mind. It's like, hey, pretend that this is worth something,
Oh, yeah. And like Pollen even gives the example of, and this has actually already been done in something called Olestra, which is the maintenance phase is a great episode about it. It's a fat that's used in certain products. I think the main one was like chips and cookies or something. Mm-hmm. I mean, sorry to get gross. It slides right out of you. It has no nutritional value. It just gives you the feeling of eating without any of like anything. Like it's just terrible. And if you think about it, that's essentially the NFTs of food. It has no nutritional value and is just like something that will generate profit.
Well, who does it generate profit for? Like, is it useful in the cooking process of something?
No, it's marketed as like a health food because it's like, well, you can eat and it'll be fine.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, then, yeah. And I think the thing you were saying with the different diets, cycling through them is interesting because used to be we would have kind of a monoculture. So we, everybody would see the same network shows and like, right. So you would have to essentially cycle through these dieting fads or whatever and say, okay, this one's the new hot one. The other ones are bad, and cycle. Now with everything so compartmentalized and splintered.
Oh, is it keto? Is it, all the different diets.
Right. You can do them all at once. And so you can make money off of all these people and just bounce them around between different ones. And they can cycle through themselves, but you can always be making money off of all of them.
Oh, yeah. I read about this one chicken plant that they do all the same processing, right? Like it is one operation. They slightly alter their product by like very small means in order to produce like a regular chicken, an organic chicken, a kosher chicken, an Asian market chicken that like still has the feet and the head on it. Like this is all the same fucking chickens. It's just like slight variations in the formula.
Yeah, they just run the assembly line like just a little different each time for part of the day. Like, or run kosher chickens for an hour.
Exactly. Like, okay, this one gets the organic corn or whatever, and this one, like it's hilarious. Like it is all. I mean, yeah, there are some very small differences, but it is mostly marketing. Another thing, like I already mentioned the French paradox, I wanted to call out a couple of other cultures that kind of prove that we don't maybe, like, I don't know, and I'm not trying to say like nutrition is all bullshit, but like a lot of traditional cultures seem to have nutrition figured out, and like it's really interesting. Like if you take the example of sushi, you know, you could say, yeah, eating raw fish sounds like a bad idea and a way to get sick. What is often paired with sushi, though, is wasabi, which is a natural inhibitor of bacteria. And like people figured out very early on, like how to combine different foods to make them like the most nutritious.
Yeah, I think in the documentary they had maybe it was in that, they had the beans and the corn thing, and like how, you know, when you eat these together, they, you know, activate the protein and everything.
Exactly. Yeah. And like, I find that interesting because I feel like a lot of fad or diet culture of food is honestly very like white centered. And so like, it's nice to be like, hey, like you can still have your fucking like beans and rice, guys, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, I don't know, there's tons of stuff that's wrong with like dieting as an approach or anything. Sure. You know, but one of them surely is like just this whole notion that like regular foods, throw that all out. You need to be eating like
these new
blocks
foods
of chicken breast, or, you know, just, yeah, you have to be eating something that is very clearly diet food. I don't know. That's always weird to me. It's like, well, why would I make my life like that?
Exactly. And I think that's the thing, is that like people are so stressed that they can turn to those things. Like, you know, Soylent fucking exists. You know, some people are really just like, I don't know, so I just eat this every day or something like that.
If you like Soylent, that's fine.
It's fine if you like it. Like fucking, like if that's your bag, go for it.
Or if you're like, yeah, too lazy to make a meal, that's, you know, we get it. It's fine. Or it's convenient for you or whatever. Do your thing. But it is like, it's kind of weird as a culture to have that.
Definitely. And like, I think, yeah, Pollen definitely takes the individualist approach of like, oh, food is this like quasi-religious experience that we should all be investing more time and money into. And I'm like, yeah, but maybe not the money part, but like, yes.
Well, but also with what? Like, where you going to lend me some time, man? Like,
yeah, exactly. I'm like, no one can do that. A lot of people fucking can't.
Yeah. And I think we're both sort of lazy in our ways, and like do kind of have some time that we could devote to various things. I know I just like waste a lot of my time.
Me too.
And I always complain, oh, I don't have time to do it. I know I do have the time, but a lot of people straight up don't. I mean, a lot of people
yeah, a lot of people can't. Yeah, people working multiple jobs, like with kids and like all kinds of shit. Like they don't have time to make a fucking home cooked, like organic meal or whatever. Like that's not going to happen.
Yeah, so I think that this is important because sometimes we think of like, okay, what role does the way we eat, you know, how does that interact with the leftist movement and stuff? Like, what are we trying to do? And, you know, one thing that doesn't seem like it's very helpful at all is to kind of take this approach and say, hey, you need to be putting more time into figuring out your diet and how you eat and everything, doing your part to like be sustainable and all that. Cause like,
that's how every medical, like that's how insurance treats it, you know, or like doctors treat it. They act like it's all up to you.
Right. Like do self-help, self-care, mental wellness, all that, you know, do that yourself, like figure that out. But it does need to be a part of our movement in terms of like, we need to be considering how to build a society that makes that an important thing. That
creates the conditions where that's possible.
Yes. Yeah. That, you know, to kind of buzzword, it empowers people, but like, you know, that makes it easy to do that. Right. And makes it like desirable to, easy to, and, you know, something also that's valued by people instead of something that's like last minute. I don't know. I think that people do see it as important generally, you know, if they're given the chance. It's just so hard for so many people to.
Oh, for sure. Like we've all been put in a position where it's like, fuck, I don't have time for anything else but a drive-thru. Like I got to do it. Or I do think food is such a big cultural factor. And I think that's why I kind of, you know, quibble with Pollen's characterization. I think like ideally, yeah, this would all be really important and accessible and something we're all into. Like maybe not. Maybe some people are like, yeah, fucking hate food. Like, okay, don't super get it, but sure. But like most people you talk to are like, yeah, I fucking love food. It's just they don't have the knowledge or the accessibility, you know, the access to time or any of those things to start, you know, price is a huge factor. If you're like, well, I don't know, I don't want to waste my money on something I don't know how to cook. I don't want to buy like a nice cut of meat and not know what to do with it, or a nice pan and not know what to do with it. Like, there's a big like snobbery gap in cooking too that I am definitely a part of. Listeners, I am a big foodie.
You?
Blame my husband and the Food Network, but mostly my husband.
But yeah, I see what you're saying. There's a big gap.
I think a lot of people want to.
Yeah. A lot of people would if they could.
Like, I feel like most people have very positive food memories of, a home-cooked meal. And, like, people kind of know that's something they should be striving for or want to strive for.
I guess one easy way to think of it is imagine if everyone worked, like, 4-hour days. Why wouldn't we make ourselves... I mean, I'm not talking a gourmet lunch every time, or you have to do brunch, mandatory communist brunch hour.
Okay, I would do that.
It's not the worst thing.
In my commune, yes.
There are worse edicts that we could pass, believe me. But all right, so, but you imagine people would like make themselves a nice lunch maybe, or brunch or breakfast, wherever they want to do it, or they'd spend some time and have dinner with friends and family and whoever. Like, it would be a more treasured experience because they'd have that window of time to like do that. Oh,
for sure. Like, that's honestly what we do for fun.
Yeah. But so many people, and myself included, some days come home and we're just fucking tired and I'm just going to eat ramen or something, just slop something processed together. And I mean, it's good to have those for convenience. I'm not saying like you would never have prepackaged things under communism.
Yeah, because there's definitely people who like require that. Like, if you are living with a disability or something, like you can't, like, you don't have the energy or something to cook. Like, yeah, you need access to those kinds of foods. But I think you should also have the option to have access to like fresh cooked food if that's something you want. Yeah,
like that's something that should, like you say, it should be there, but it's not a necessity that you can only, that's all you can get is, Happy Meal level, nutrition.
Yeah, because I want to be careful about like completely demonizing prepackaged food, because I this kind of like set me back in my foodie ways. I saw like this tweet of someone putting people who use like granulated garlic in like a plastic jar, like one of those big ass jars, like just making a joke, like, who the fuck uses these?
What, like minced garlic?
Like, yeah, minced, sorry, not granulated. I get those mixed up. So like the little chunkies.
Yeah.
And somebody was like, I'm disabled. Like, I have to use this. I don't have like the dexterity and the, the energy required to like hand peel garlic and chop it. Like, that's what I have to do. And I was like, yeah, I've never considered that. Like, a lot of cooking is physically demanding. So like, yeah, we have to be able to provide those options too.
For sure. And not just prepackaged things, but also, I guess maybe we've talked about this before, of like, having good communal places to eat, like to eat out, to go and enjoy a restaurant meal and everything for free, of course, and just like with your friends and all that. But like, that should also be a thing.
It should be. Okay, so let's get into some of the other areas of the food economy that are still a little fucked, because you may have listened to the last episode and you're like, oh, maybe I should just like go buy organic. Is that better? And the answer is sort of. It's complicated.
It's sort of better to buy organic.
I feel comfortable saying sort of, because a very first thing you gotta know is it's still a business. It made $56.5 billion in the United States in 2020. So like, is capitalism, guys. Like, it's gonna do capitalism.
You cannot walk the blameless path within capitalism. So you're still gonna be interacting with its various sins.
Yes. But before we get to where it is today, I want to do a brief little look back on some of the organic movement. Interestingly, the first like use of the word organic, like in kind of the social critics of the time, was in the 19th century. And this was to contrast the Industrial Revolution. They were decrying the atomization of society and the lack of cooperation. And I think that's really telling.
Yeah.
Because if you think about our conversation about like the food marketing execs looking at an American family and how to divvy up their day so they can have a product for each part of the day to eat. That's atomization, y'all.
Yeah, so instead seeing that more as like a full organism, organic, like a full part of a whole.
Yeah, yeah. Kind of the start of a lot of organic knowledge was in the 1940s. You started getting these kind of magazines coming up, which, like, to me, that's very early. One of them was called Organic Gardening and Farming, and I just wanted to read this review for the magazine.
All right.
It says, I believe that organic gardeners are in the forefront of a serious effort to save the world by changing man's orientation to it, to move away from the collective, centrist, super-industrial state toward a simpler, realer, one-to-one relationship with the earth itself. Pretty highfalutin stuff.
Yeah, very ambitious.
Yeah, but like even in the kind of early texts in the 40s and 50s, and then you definitely see it in the 70s, like the 60s and 70s, there's this like kind of anti-capitalist or anti-industrial at least streak to these food movements.
Yeah, so it comes across kind of as back to the landy.
Definitely. And that's where you get all like the co-ops and communes and that kind of food counterculture that hit its peak in the 60s. People's Park in Berkeley, which was also featured in our Angela Davis episode, has some roots with this too. In 1969, there was a group called the Robin Hood Commission, who basically did some digger action. They seized a vacant lot owned by the University of California and started planting food.
Hell yeah.
They wanted to create a new cooperative society based on uncontaminated food.
Nice. Before we get too much further down this road, stupid question from me, but if you're a listener who had the same question, I'm not calling you stupid. You're cool. Primer definition. What does organic mean?
That's a good fucking question.
All right.
That definition will radically change as we go forward. At this point in the 60s and 70s, it was explicitly a rejection of the military-industrial complex because by rejecting these chemicals, they're saying, Dow and Monsanto make these fertilizers and they also make Agent Orange and napalm, and we're not okay with that. So we are making natural food as like a political statement.
So natural food meaning like they're not using...
In this case, it's like no chemicals, no pesticides, no fertilizers, just fucking seeds and dirt.
All right. So no artificial fertilizer or pesticides.
Yeah, I guess artificial because you could still, put poop on it.
Yeah, it's inexact to say no chemicals because it's, everything's chemicals, but...
Exactly. So at this point, it's an extremely radical definition. And what is super fascinating is how this movement gets completely watered down through capitalism. Like you can trace the origins of a lot of these organic companies. Like I think Horizon, who does like all the milks, Earthbound, which does a lot of the veggies. They start out like going to these fucking hippie ass farmers markets, just like, oh yeah, we grow lettuce and like whatever. And then they start getting bigger and bigger contracts and they have to keep up. And guess what they end up doing, guys? Factory farming, just slightly better.
So how do they maintain, I'm organic, but not do it as much?
So a lot of that has to do with regulations. When you start going from kind of your rinky-dink operations to like the larger operations, they kind of start taking off because actually we have some food scares in our economy. Things get tainted. One in particular was, I think, something that was like used on apples and it ended up like being bad for you. And so there was a big scare about it. And then people are like, okay, maybe I should buy organic. And so like there was a huge demand. And so they began taking off. And that's when they had to start scaling up. And so the Department of Agriculture then had to like create standards for certified organic. Here's the problem.
All right.
You know how like their best friends are like big agriculture?
Yeah. Funny about that.
They wanted to basically leave room for them to get in the game because they were worried that if they set these standards for organic, then it would give a stigma to all non-organic food. And like even to the point where you have like the Secretary General just straight up saying like organic food is no better for you than the other food. And, you know, just like making it very clear, like this is just a marketing tactic.
But here are the guidelines for said marketing tactic.
Yes. So some of the guidelines are in 1997, I think like one of their earlier drafts of this, they allowed for GMOs. They allowed for irradiation, which basically means instead of, you know, washing your stuff and making sure it's not tainted, you can just blast it and, you know, whatever. There might be poop in there, but it's very clean poop. Very lax sewage standards. And as these standards continued to be modified and updated, big organic companies won more of the battles. You could basically have a factory farm that was, to the naked eye, to the untrained eye, looks exactly the same as a regular industrial farm, you know, non-organic, because of a little thing that I think you and I will chuckle at, which is the beautiful word of every liberal's heart called access.
Ooh, all right. Yeah. Love me some access.
A lot of the animal-based rules are around access to pasture, but that can mean fucking anything. It is unenforceable. You can get organic milk from cows who like never eat grass, but it's organic because they eat grain that was grown organically.
Whoa.
So, you know, you look at the picture of the milk, it's got the happy cow in the fields, and you're like, I'm doing a good thing.
But he ate happy grass, but he himself was not a happy cow. Or she was not.
Or happy corn. It doesn't fucking matter.
Damn.
So it's not like they're actually, because as we talked about last time, cows can't digest corn. It's very bad for their tummies.
So I drive like an old car, you know? But I drive on the same roads as like fancy Teslas and all that. Like, so it's pretty much the same as having one of those, right? Like I can tell people I drive a Tesla.
Yeah, because you're in the same road.
Yeah, I drive the same roads as they. So.
I mean, yeah, it's basically that same amount of logic. A similar rule with chickens. They have to, if you ever hear free range chicken, you assume, yeah, that chicken's living outside all the time. It's fucking great, having its chicken time of its life.
Yeah, partying.
Apparently, that just means they have to have access to a yard, and most operations, they don't give them access to the yard till later in their life because, like, they will not have the immune system to deal with it. It has to be a pretty, like, not hermetically sealed, but like pretty tight environment microbially because they are still pretty crowded, but they're not giving as many like antibiotics and stuff because there's rules around that. So they don't let them out until like 2 weeks before they kill them.
So it's a retirement party.
Here's the thing, because these chickens have never been outside, most of them don't go because they're like, why the fuck would I go out there? I've never been there.
Yeah, slash they can't walk and like all this other stuff.
Yeah, there's just, it's a meaningless term for a lot of these things.
All right, so free range doesn't help. What was the other one that we just said? Organic cows?
Organic milk.
Organic milk doesn't help.
Organic beef can just be fed on, listen to this combination of words, organic high fructose corn syrup. It's organic corn, though.
Organic high fructose corn syrup. What
Delicious.
is that like? What's the analogy there?
I don't even know. That's like...
It's like a designer Ziploc bag.
I like that. Like hand-sewn, artisan-made.
Something dumb, right? Or
but
something
it's from
like
plastic.
Yeah, like just... you can make cool things out of plastic, but not just like something or like artisanal toilet papers. I don't know. Like, wow, that's wild. I have heard that dairy cows in general, though, have like pretty nice lives. Like they're kind of pampered compared to other, livestock, I guess.
No, not really. I mean, they're very stressed whenever you take their calves away from them. They are still spending all their time inside most of the time. It's not really how a cow is meant to live. You know, they're often still fed corn, like we talked about. They have a lot of the same problems.
Okay.
So yeah, we'll get to kind of the treatment of animals later, but in general, I think it's still not great for most of these. And you can tell, like, these rules around them really, they're not for the animals' welfare in the vast majority of cases. It's in order to make room for big operations and their, efficiency.
Okay, yeah.
When you get to, like, environmental impact, I think that's when you start to get more of the benefits of organic produce, specifically meat a little bit as well. It's definitely better. You're not using pesticides that are, harming the skin of workers who are, like, doing work on the farm like you are with other, farms. There's no, like, nitrogen runoff and other pollutants. It's overall better for the soil. Earthbound, one of those big companies that does, like, pretty much a lot of the produce you'll see in, like, Whole Foods and stuff like that. They claim to have saved an estimated 270,000 pounds of pesticide and 1 million pounds of petrochemical fertilizer by converting farmlands to organic. These are kind of old numbers. I haven't looked up the most recent stats on that. But you can tell, like, yeah, it's a net good to not have those things in the system, because we talked about last time, like, yeah, that's very bad for your water table. It's bad for your health. Like, yeah, we shouldn't be doing that. They still do some shady shit. They're using a ton of migrant labor, just like large-scale farms. They're not exposing them to dangerous pesticides, but they're still, like, not giving them health insurance, unlike their full-time employees. So, like, they're still doing capitalism, is the point.
Yeah, it's definitely not enough to stop there and say, well, we did it. Right? Yeah, it's like if you go through all the factories utilizing child labor and the early industrial revolution, and you go through and make sure they have regular handrails to prevent anyone from falling in, and also little short ones to prevent the little kids from falling in too. It's like, great, I guess fewer of them are going to die while they're in here slaving away, but they're still here.
I almost choked on my coffee. Gee, just picturing, like, a little 3-year-old grasping at a handrail.
Well, I mean, yeah, like, I guess you're right that, like, yeah, it does cut back on a lot of stuff. Like, I mean, that's good.
It's good, but here's the thing. If you actually take a closer look at their energy consumption, if you think about, like, things like prepackaged lettuce, which is a super energy intensive thing because you have to, like, cut it and wash it and refrigerate it the moment it's picked. Then you have to transport it and it's still refrigerated. The bags have, like, fucking gas in them so they stay fresh.
And they're made out of oil. I mean, they're made out of petrochemicals,
Yeah, exactly. Like, that whole process. You get 80 calories from the lettuce, from pre-washed lettuce, but the whole energy of producing it is 57 calories of fossil fuel energy per 1 calorie of food.
Yeah, lettuce is really always going to end up on that.
I mean, yeah, lettuce is a bad example in terms of calories, but, like, the idea is that it's a crazy ratio, and it's, like, just the cost of transporting and washing and refrigeration, like, all that, they're still doing all of that stuff that is, like, really bad for the environment, and, like, that ain't good.
Right, yeah. I think whatever system we put together for food production needs to take this organic approach of, like, we're not fucking using all these, pesticides overabundant, because there's probably some sort of ways to do it. I guess the organic guys do it in a way that, like, still, uses whatever you need to use to grow stuff, but
they still do that. Yeah, they still do things. They don't just, like, let it go. Like, a lot of times
the bugs ate it. Yeah.
A lot of times they'll introduce, like, competing species to, like, kill off those bugs and stuff like that. Like, there's things you can do. Like, there's, maybe they do hand weeding, or maybe they, I think there's something like you, like, aerate the soil to prevent weeds, but that's also, like, kind of bad for the soil. It's a system of trade-offs, but, like, clearly one option is better.
Okay, yeah. Because I also don't want to be, like, a anarcho-primitivist too much and say, like, oh, we can't have, like, medicine or science at all, like, yeah, no, we do need some things, but we need to try to choose the, like, least destructive option. But it's not enough to just, like, get the capitalists to be nice enough to do these things. Like, you have to take power from them, or remove them from power. If you want to be anarchist about it, not really have power, that's fine, but you have to be the people have to be the ones in control of it, so that you don't end up carting everything around or loading everything into big container trucks or container ships and everything and trucking lettuce across the planet.
Yeah, because again, this started as a super radical movement and look what it got turned into. It's just basically checking boxes, not at all following the spirit of the law as just the letter of the law of like, oh yeah, we're technically organic.
Right. Like how can we spin this to where we will go back to making a bunch of money and not have to listen to people complain so much about this stuff,
Yeah, and like a lot of the big food companies like own organic brands, and they're doing it so they can access more of the market and charge more for it.
Like you were saying of the chicken factory, so like you're saying basically like Tyson could have just rolling regular, economy size chicken, bags or whatever, and then the delicate the ones that go to Whole Foods little small organic ones, and then whatever, they can roll them all through the same thing, or they maybe have like a subsidiary that it gets branded under, even so you don't even see Tyson on the label. I don't know if specifically them, but I mean
no, that definitely happens.
Lay's or what have you, the big guys that are
definitely evil.
Yeah, you don't have those guys label on it. You have green,
like Rosie's Special Farm.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's really the same guy, just in a different suit.
Mm-hmm. I mean, a lot of times, like the really big food companies tend to have organic lines. So,
and there may be you may have a different section on that, but are food companies in America increasingly under like just gigantic food conglomerates?
I don't have the data on this, but from what I've seen around the internet, yeah, pretty much all our food comes from like a handful of companies. You got your Nestle, you got your I know that's a really big one.
Nestle, Pepsi,
Frito-Lay,
Coke, Unilever, Mars.
Oh yeah, Unilever's is that Johnson & Johnson or is that a different company?
I
don't know. They're all guys, there's only like 5 companies now.
But it's like you see, I mean, I've seen that too, right? That's what I was kind of basically referring to, is those little charts that trace it all back to like the 7 brands or whatever. And you're like, shit.
Yep. So let's go the opposite direction. We don't want to do that, right?
Yes.
Pollan spends a lot of his time at this farm owned by Joel Salatin. And this guy is crazy, and I love him. He's introduced, he self-describes as a Christian conservative, libertarian, environmentalist, lunatic farmer.
This is the guy that you love?
Right? I was not expecting to like this guy. I was so worried, but he has some cool ideas.
Let's hear him. What is Joel about?
So, first off, his farm is not considered organic, but after reading about it, I feel like this is a really good model for sustainable farming. It's really cool.
What does he run afoul of to not be organic if McDonald's could run a farm and be organic?
It's because there's a lot of standards that are, again, suited for a large operation, and he is not that. And so, especially when it comes to meat processing, in order to be USDA certified, you have to have these facilities that can accommodate for basically a large scale operation. He's like, I don't do that.
Is one equivalent to think of this like how they make abortion providers, they try to make them have hospital clearances or things like that, where it's not really appropriate for what they're doing, but they're just actually trying to legislate them out?
I think that's a pretty good parallel. The example the book gives is, in order to be USDA certified, you have to have a bathroom specifically for a USDA inspector to come check out. And it's if this is a small ass operation on my family farm, I can just go to my house and go to the bathroom,
Yeah.
There's no need for that. And you have to have all these really exacting standards that really are designed to clean meat from an unclean system that we talked about last week of there's shit everywhere. Yeah, there's tons of antibiotics. Everybody's sick. It's not a good environment. Whereas Joel is taking more of a preventative system, as we will see, where he's I don't need all that stuff because I do it right. But
then because he doesn't have that, then he's the bad guy. Okay, I got it.
All right, so I want to start off with some fire quotes from Joel.
Joel, is it his diss track?
Yes, yes.
Well, did you know that diss is apparently like, okay, how do you spell diss?
DISS?
This is how I spell diss, but apparently the like older and like initially correct spelling is DIS.
Oh, I did not know this.
People apparently use both, and the use of DISS is on the rise. So maybe that's why we think it's DISS, but
I don't know. I've seen DIS as a shorthand for like this, but that's very strange.
yeah.
Okay. Fun linguistic sidebar.
Yeah, you can cut that if you need.
No, we're keeping it. Okay, so Joel's least favorite things include the, quote, Western conquistador mentality.
Hell yeah. All right.
Yeah, like, good start. He calls the food system a, quote, decidedly Western, disconnected, reductionist, Wall Streetified marketing system.
I mean, I can't disagree.
Wall Streetified is a really good term.
I must just start referring to things I don't like as Wall Streetified.
And he, like, really sticks to his guns to a point where, like, he refuses to ship the author a sample of his chicken or his steak. He says, just because we can ship organic lettuce from the Salinas Valley or organic cut flowers from Peru doesn't mean we should do it. Not if we're really serious about energy and seasonality and bioregionalism.
I mean, he's kind of true. I was thinking about that. Like, I would want to have some
fruit.
Regional variety wherever things are. Like, we would have to do some sort of commune level, like
some distribution.
Yeah, but like it'd have to be within reason. I mean, everybody can't be eating stuff from far away all the time. You would have to say, okay, well, we're going to get this shipment in, and we'll have a limited store of whatever, and we'll enjoy very small portions of exotic food A.
We go back to having oranges for Christmas.
Yeah, and everyone's like, fuck yeah, oranges.
An orange. I mean, that's a little extreme, but I mean, I think you're right. I think whatever system we come up with has to address seasonality and local eating in a way that's not destructive to the environment, or at least not as destructive. Because right now we're fucking jetting food around.
Yeah, and we're what the UN said we're just tumbling toward climate catastrophe.
Oh, completely.
Like they recently said, we're going to go right past the already insufficient goals we had set for ourselves. And we'll be lucky to like overshoot that by only a little bit.
Oh, good Lord. Great.
And they're still phrasing it like we're going to take drastic action, and it's
that's cute.
Where is that going to happen? Like
I don't know, man. Don't know.
It'll take you listeners out there like seizing the means of production for that to happen.
I think so. I think it's going to be a full fucking mass riot if we don't, because we'll all be dying.
Yeah.
Anyway, Joel's farming method, he really, instead of focusing on a monoculture of corn, he considers himself a grass farmer, and he practices what's called management-intensive grazing. So basically what this means is he is always moving his animals around in order to practice rotational grazing. So that way, they go into like a lot of detail about this, but all you need to know is this is the best way to graze grass so that it continues to grow and doesn't fuck up the soil. You don't have all those windswept lands like you do in, Iowa currently with their current method of corn production. You actually have like a healthy pasture.
I mean, is this the basic idea of like crop rotation, like fallow field to graze on, and like you're obviously also shitting in it for fertilizer, and then you rotate?
Essentially, yeah. Like this kind of focuses more on the animal production side of it. He also does grow crops. He grows a fuck ton of food. Like he only has 100 acres, but like he grows tons and tons of food and meat, and the land is actually improving over time instead of degrading like a lot of farms. Through grazing practices that are like responsible, he's able to get healthier cows, he gets better grass, he gets biodiversity, he gets that good humus that we were talking about last time, that really healthy soil. And he actually kind of brought this farm back to life. His family did, because it was a really eroded and like rocky and had all these like ditches and stuff. And he managed to make the land better through this.
Nice. Now, one thing I think that you may run into, right? We may have the criticism is, well, okay, he improved the land there, but like his yield per acre or whatever, however much food he's producing there, has got to be like smaller. Like it's got to be wimpier in scale compared to like agribusiness and stuff. There's a reason they have the big, huge combines and all their chemicals. They have to produce more to feed, the teeming hordes of the world compared to this guy, right? Like if we all do this, isn't there going to be more hunger?
So, yeah, you're right. I don't think he's ever going to get to that scale. But, I mean, the amount of food this guy makes, I mean, to me at least, and maybe I don't have an appropriate understanding of how much food this is, it still sounds like a lot. He's doing 30,000 dozen eggs, 12,000 broiler hens, 800 stewing hens, 50 beeves, which is 25,000 pounds of beef, 250 hogs, which is 50,000 pounds of pork, 800 turkeys, and 500 rabbits in one season.
Man, all right. So that's a lot. I guess I'm the same as you. That sounds like a lot. There's also, because I was kind of raising that as like a negative thing, right? But another counter to that could be, for one, we could figure out how to scale up operations once we've like determined what our priorities are, right? So like we know, okay, we're trying to do this organically, we're trying to do this in a way that's sustainable, and we can work within those parameters to scale up. So if we're trying to scale up and, we got to just start using this big chemical thing. And it's like, well, no, I guess we won't do that, but maybe there are ways to do it.
Yeah, I mean, like, I'm a person who believes in, like, nuance and not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. So, like, I think maybe a good approach or, like, a starting point would be kind of the organic stuff we talked about earlier. Of like, okay, we can at least agree on these basic tenets. Mm-hmm. We'll never do these things. Yeah. And we can definitely, start to play around with the scale of this. Like, yeah, if this works for your community, you have a few farmers who are like really good at this kind of farming, go for it. If that's not something that's available in your community, like maybe, you have to do more of like a slightly industrialized process. I guess, I think it's going to take some adjusting of those knobs to figure out like, all right, what kind of compromises are we okay with and what are we not okay with?
Yeah. And that would have to be something that the commune decides together. I think another thing is we don't have to scale it up to the level of food production that we have now.
Oh, I remember my point earlier.
Ooh, okay.
Listeners, I forgot a point. We had to cut that. Do you remember that tweet that was like just taking a picture of I think it was like a packaged like pear in like juice, and it was like grown in Thailand, packaged in Argentina, and like they were eating it in the United States. Like we don't have to do that bullshit anymore.
Yeah. We won't have to produce as much like stuff that is solely there so that we can market it to people.
Mm-hmm. We're growing a lot less bullshit food.
Yeah, and there's, like we said, there's a place for it or whatever. It's fine to have like little treats in them. We're certainly not moralizing to you as to what you do, but from the terms of like societal production and everything, like we just won't have a place for so many stupid things.
Yeah, you won't have like 100 different brands of what is essentially the same like peanut butter cup. We can all just agree like this one's good.
Yeah.
We don't need to do that.
Yeah. We don't have to make like Uncrustables or whatever other weird things there are. And if we are societally, like trying to produce things in a, I guess in a more organic way, but in a more like sustainable and positive, nutritionally thing for everybody, we're probably going to need a lot less capacity for producing meat.
I think you're right. I think whatever we do, we're probably going to have to cut back on meat, at the very least, just for climate reasons. Like, we can't do that for a while, y'all. we got to stop for a minute. That being said, I think Joel's farm offers some intriguing reasons to keep animals on the farm that we'll see.
Yeah, I don't mean to say that it has to be abolished all the way. I'm not quite there yet, though. I'm open to those ideas. But yeah, let's get into it and then talk about it, I guess.
I think the end result would be like, yeah, meat would probably still be more occasional, even if you do a system like this, like where you're still raising animals for meat, but it's in a way that also gives back to the land. So Joel really focuses on moving animals in and out of an environment to mimic nature. And he calls this kind of interdependent system of variables, he calls that stacking. And I've got a couple of examples. One is the chicken's relationship to the grass and the cows. So if you think about nature, like if you picture like a savanna, you get the herding animals out there on the grass. And then when they leave, you see birds come after it because they eat bugs found in the manure. And so Joel mimics this on his farm. The cows graze the grass and the chickens come in and clean up the manure from the parasites and the flies. So you have fewer flies bothering your cattle. That's good. Both of these animals deposit manure to make the grass like richer, and the chickens make eggs. And so you are not only getting good grass, you're getting good cows and good chickens. Another combination is rabbits and chickens. Putting them together in a hutch, or basically giving the chickens access to the rabbit hutch. A traditional hutch usually is super fucking stinky because there's so much ammonia in rabbit urine, so much so that like rabbits will get sick and you have to pump them full of antibiotics. But what Joel does is he introduces chickens to disturb the wood chips inside of the hutch, and that produces compost and earthworms. And so just by like aerating that stuff, it's less concentrated and his rabbits don't get sick.
And it produces earthworms, like, so that, I don't know, do chickens eat earthworms? It sounds like something they would do.
Oh, they love it.
Okay.
Same thing, turkeys, putting them out in vineyards because turkeys don't really mess with crops, but they will fertilize your plants for you. So basically, like, utilizing every component of every animal, Joel characterizes it as letting these animals, like, live up to their kind of natural expectations. He lets his pigs go chew brush down for him and aerate soil and things like that to just like basically create a very optimal environment for both the plants and the animals.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
It's complicated.
Yeah, I was going to say there is, because we were kind of musing last time about, well, it really sucks, all these animals getting killed and everything. At the end of the day, these guys do still get killed. I mean, I know everything dies.
Yeah.
But
are you getting into the ethics of eating animals? Because I have that in a later section.
Okay. All right. I guess we'll have to wrestle with that when the time comes.
We do. We definitely do. But for now, let's keep talking about pigs being happy.
Yeah, they do. That does sound like a better way to spend one's life. Walking around doing things that you're, that's more or less natural to you.
Yeah, like another example is he basically, instead of mucking out the manure from the cattle barn, he just puts wood chips over it. And this acts as like a natural heater for the winter. Like the floor kind of gets higher and higher. But instead of just like being gross shit, he lets the pigs come in and they root around for corn that he hides inside of the bed of wood chips. And this aerates it and basically turns it into this really rich compost and kills any like pathogens that would be in there. So out of that, you get happy pigs, happy cows, and good like fertilizer.
Weird. Okay.
It's nuts. Like it's really fascinating stuff. I'm like, I want to visit this farm. Like, no joke. I want to visit it.
Yeah, that's cool.
Another thing that I think is really interesting is if you look at, those numbers we were talking about earlier about how much food he produces, you could say, oh, wow, you're producing a lot of food just off of 100 acres. And he would tell you, I'm actually using more than that because I have the farmland next door that he also takes care of. He considers the trees to be part of this too because they reduce the wind erosion of the grass. The forest also provides biodiversity. Instead of having to use pesticides, your birds will just eat insects for you.
Yeah, as they found out in the Great Leap Forward, you don't want to go against the sparrows. Never go against the sparrows.
Those sparrows will fuck you up.
Yeah.
Instead of worrying about classic fox going into the hen house, if you have a rich forest environment, they're going to stay in the fucking forest because they have creatures to chase.
Yeah, they don't need to come and get your weird farm raised stuff. They have plenty of good things to hunt out there, right?
Yeah. And if you took all this land and you looked at it from a traditional economic standpoint, which I think you were kind of immediately tempted to do, it's seen as inefficient or a waste of space. But if you got rid of that, the land would ultimately be less healthy.
Yeah, and that's not, I think, something that...
we don't factor in for that.
Yeah, our society tries to ignore that part and essentially just externalizes that cost. Just says, hey, the land's fucked up. That's for you guys to deal with. We're making money,
Yeah, it's a hidden cost.
That we're more and more finding out about and realizing that we're going to all have to pay at once.
It's pretty bad. Another thing Joel is really passionate about is transparency. He does all of his meat production. You can just come watch it, which is not the case in a slaughterhouse, guys. Those are very closed operations.
You can't just go down to your to your local conglomerate slaughterhouse and bring the whole family.
Michael Pollan was not allowed in there. He just had to have the guy who designed it describe it to him.
I don't know if you've ever seen some of those hidden camera videos sort of things that people have to smuggle into those places because they're so barbaric and everything in terms of appearance and everything.
Oh, it's pure dystopian stuff. We'll get to some of it in a minute, but it's pretty bad.
But he'll show you. He'll be like, "Hey, here's your cow.
Here's what happens."
Yeah.
I think with the cows, he actually has to send those out to get processed because of USDA regulations.
And they're pretty big. I mean,
the chickens he will do basically out in the open, and you can come and help if you want. And yeah. So one thing, talking about seasonality, I think you're right. We're going to have some adjustments. But what I think is interesting is that some cuisines have already kind of adapted themselves for that. In Switzerland, apparently chefs are taught to cater their menus to the type of eggs you get throughout the year.
Oh, okay.
Because sometimes you'll have eggs with better yolks. I think it's maybe during the summer or something. Sometimes it's better whites, whatever. And you adjust your menu. I can't make a souffle if my whites suck because I need them to be fluffy. And you just adjust per the food. And I think you can make that argument for a lot of seasonality.
Yeah, and I would say that, maybe right now, in our moment in history, we see that, there are some cuisines that do this or what have you.
Mm-hmm. Most don't.
Yeah, but I think that's very modern, I think, right? So if you were, I'm sure most cuisines had seasonality be pretty central to their whole thing because, you had to do that. You didn't have flash freezing and stuff, Oh,
completely. Normally red meat is in the winter, chicken is in the summer, people used to know kind of the seasonality of vegetables, a few things we kind of still know, we're I think peaches are in the summer.
Stardew Valley players know this stuff.
Stardew Valley players know what's up.
We at least know when parsnips and turnips are, but that would be something.
Vegetables.
Yeah. But that's something we'd have to relearn, I guess, right? Is the seasonality of all that. And how to work with that. I guess it's a worthy trade-off, right? It sounds kind of inconvenient, but you still have some frozen stuff.
Yeah, I think, like we were talking about earlier, I think it'd be a bit of a trade-off of maybe you're eating, a few more turnips than you normally do. But I don't think it's going to be sad dystopian, it's potato for every meal kind of situation. I think there's got to be a balance between providing that variety to keep people, happy and being responsible about it. All right, but let's get to something you brought up before, which is is it even ethical to eat animals in the first place?
Okay.
Pollan does a little research. I did a little research about animal ethics. A lot of these concepts are from a text, Animal Liberation by Peter Singer, not to be confused with Pete Seeger, which that's how I read the name at first. And I was interesting.
He probably has some cool songs about animal liberation, though.
There's a lot of different approaches to animal rights. Some people are more in line with, okay, let's just improve the conditions because, the conditions are pretty bad, which we'll get to. Some people are against eating it at all for ethical or religious reasons, all kinds of different reasons, or environmental reasons. Some people are really of the belief that they should have almost like personhood rights. It really just depends on what your stripe is. There's a lot of different varieties out there. Peter Singer's ideas are about, he kind of rejects the idea of rights-based values, but he is very utilitarian. His thing is we should minimize suffering for the greatest good. I usually don't vibe with utilitarians, and yeah, it turns out I don't super vibe with this one either.
Okay.
I think it is really reductive. He basically says that, if we all agree that we should treat people equally, regardless of intelligence, then we should treat animals better than we do because some animals are more intelligent than some humans. He uses the example of babies and mentally handicapped people.
Well, babies, I mean, I'm not going to argue with them there. Babies are fucking stupid.
Babies are idiots. I will tell you that.
Yeah.
But he puts up these weird moral paradox arguments and I'm just like, fuck off. He's like, what if you had to kill a gorilla or a mentally handicapped child? And I'm like, shut up.
All right. In his defense, all right, you're picking on him for his predilection, or people will call this a disability, is that he's a philosopher. Okay, that's like what they do.
That is what they do. They come up with imaginary problems.
They traffic in hypotheticals. Yeah,
that's a privilege if I ever heard of it. What if I had to deal with this?
So try not to don't punch down on philosophers.
I don't know. I haven't met too many that I'm into. No offense, philosopher people. You can hate me if you want. It's fine.
Philosophy has its place for sure. I'm just saying that is the way that a lot of philosophical problems are thought through, is completely absurd hypotheticals, but it tries to break it down to, can we come up with any principles to govern what we're saying, or are we more or less just operating based on feelings?
I think feelings have value, though. I think that's a really bad faith argument, and I think it just doesn't account for, morals or cultural values or anything with nuance. It attempts to reduce us into honestly, efficiency. And I don't think that's okay.
I think that generally
we're going to get so much philosopher hate mail, and they're going to be really long, and I'm not going to read them.
Oh, don't delete them, though.
I'll let Grady read them.
Okay. Don't censor my mail. You're like my FBI guy. I don't
Dan.
I don't know. I think there's a place for trying to figure out what governs thought, our thought process or our morality process. Is there something that kind of unites different cultures and stuff on that? How do we arrive at these conclusions? And I don't think it has to be deterministic. It doesn't have to be determine how many experiences this thing has had the chance to accumulate, and that's its, we can give a number to that, and that's X, and that's its, life value. And if it's under 35, you can kill it.
It's gone. You
can kill it and eat it. It's not obviously not going to be to that level, but I think it's interesting. I don't know. I just want to defend it. It's kind of interesting to me, maybe not to most people, to kind of dive into, okay, why do we hold these beliefs about gorillas versus about whatever, different animals too? Because people will say, oh, pigs, dolphins, octopus, very smart.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe don't kill them.
We do eat 2 of those.
Shrimp, very stupid. Kill it as much as you want. And it's well, there must be some sort of intelligence, factor at play, or something factor at play, or whatever, mammalian versus other things.
No, and that is very common with a lot of animal rights activists. They'll kind of draw the line. Some people it's fish, some people it's mollusks, because they don't seem to be sentient. So it's just they're basically just chilling.
Or bugs,
Or bugs, yeah, maybe. I see what you're saying. I think it has value. It is just not for me. I think I'm just a little too materialist, and I'm just okay, that situation wouldn't happen. I'm I get very exhausted by hypotheticals. Just, I think too, as a trans person, and it just, that there's so many bad faith arguments thrown at you where you're this isn't a thing. We're literally legislating for teenagers, in one teenager in a state is getting a whole fucking sports bill around them. That's what you get.
For sure. Yeah, I get that. And I'm lucky enough not to be on the receiving end of so many philosophical exercises, just trying to use, reason.
I'm just asking questions.
Yeah. So makes sense. So anyway, he comes down on the side of animals should not be consumed.
Animals should not be killed, hunted, consumed, anything.
Okay. But he does so in an annoying way.
I think his rhetoric is useless, but
Okay.
I get what he's saying. It's not for me.
All right.
One thing that I think is interesting is he basically argues, you could take a look at a lot of these animal rights kind of ideas and say, okay, a cow wouldn't be able to live without humans at this point.
Oh, okay. All right.
We were talking about the natural state of a pig or a chicken or a cow. Like, those wouldn't really exist in their current forms if it weren't for humans. And he kind of says, yeah, that species probably won't exist eventually. Which I don't know how I feel about that.
That's kind of law of the jungle sort of thing.
Yeah, because it's like, some people, some like animal rights stripes think you shouldn't own any animals, including pets. And I'm like, I think pets have a lot of like value.
Well, dogs.
We're pet people.
That same argument applies to like most breeds of dogs are like, not most breeds of dogs are in this case, but some breeds of dogs are like fucked beyond no reason in terms of like their ability to exist.
Yeah, we've fucked over like all pugs. Like, those should not have existed. We really did them a disservice.
The simple argument there is, okay, so if we just turned all dogs loose, they're gone. The pugs, no. And there are several dogs dog breeds that would really struggle to make it out in the wild and everything.
I'm just picturing my dog like going hunting in the fucking wilds.
Yeah, Copper could do it. Yeah,
he could do it. He looks like a dingo.
Yeah, Danjan could not. He'd go make friends with the nearest coyote once, and that would be it.
Oh my god, he's so stupid. No, Remy and Higgins would not last 5 minutes.
So when he says, right, okay, some species are just gonna go, and that's fine.
Couldn't you make the same argument about humans? Like, seems like we're gonna go. Climate change.
Yeah, ultimately we're a species on Earth, and we're gonna fight for... We're cognizant enough to try to fight for our survival or whatever, just as any other animals are smart enough to try to adapt to new conditions and things and whatnot and come up with new survival techniques. I don't know. There's certain animals people are sentimental about. Your biologists and stuff will be like, damn, this species of shellfish is dying out. Or your climate scientists will be like, this is indicative of climate change or what have you. But if it's just like,
an ugly fish.
Yeah.
It's not a panda.
Yeah. Some sorts of things just like ebb and flow and, you really don't shed too much of a tear about it. It's just, it happened.
Yeah. Yeah. We're very selective about which animals we empathize with. I think we've talked about this. Like, why do we think animals are cute? Like, what a weird trait to have.
Yeah.
Like, evolutionarily.
Mm-hmm. So he says, don't even... just turn them loose. Turn them all loose.
No more animal ownership. Yeah, we're done. He also says, and this part I think kind of rings true for me. I'm like, this one's hard to reckon with, because he basically argues that since we can stop eating meat, we have learned how to get around that. We should, because at the end of the day, it's just a dietary preference, and that cannot be worth an animal's life. I think that's interesting. I think it ignores some like cultural importance of meat eating, that like it's a ritual that goes back forever, Yeah,
you don't want to be Eurocentric or just completely casting out people's culture and be like, well, your culture sucks because you guys eat meat. And I don't know, there's probably ways to do it where you gradually change. You will gradually change people's culture to move to a world that doesn't eat meat at all.
Yeah, and here's my thing. Pollen actually comes back with a very good reply for this particular reply guy. His argument of, well, we don't technically need to, so we shouldn't. You could say the same thing about, like, sex. You can artificially inseminate people, so why are we bothering with all this sex? Because it's good and we like it.
Well,
It's a human need.
So
I think cooking is a human need.
Is eating meat instinctual?
I don't know if it's, I mean, evolutionary, like we're designed to also eat meat for sure. But I think beyond that is that our culture, our society finds some sort of value in it. And maybe it's over. I think it's gone too far in the other direction at this point. But I think there's still a place for it.
Yeah, there's probably some other good analogy that makes it a little more. I'm just saying that, like, if you didn't teach a human anything, they would still like know how to have sex because
That's true.
It's an instinct. Meat.
I don't know
maybe.
if the same is true about meat. Yeah.
Yeah, or maybe they just survive off of whatever there was.
Most people think it smells good.
That's true. They have that's an instinctual preference. Rather, I don't know.
Interesting.
Smarter people than us could probably figure that out.
Yeah, listeners, if you have a better analogy.
Probably already know. They already know the answer to that. And they're just like, oh.
You guys are dumb. And then there's also the argument that, like, even if everyone goes vegan, like, you're going to end up disturbing the environment some way by, creating and using farmland. There's animals that live on those lands. You're going to have to import a ton of food, like we just talked about. Like, it's not going to be completely morally clean. Like, it's very difficult to do that.
Yeah, that's true. And I mean, hell, that's why the Jainists like wear masks to not breathe in bugs. Like, it's extreme to live in that way. And that's essentially what he's arguing for, which I don't know. I mean, I think that people should totally think about that. And in my case, I think it's just sort of using that as a way to be more aware of what I do and try to cut back in ways that I can, in terms of what moral choices I want to make. But overall, as a society, maybe we don't have to. Maybe it's not even the wisest choice to go completely vegan. Maybe it's like it should be more encouraged, or it should be like what a lot of people decide to do as a community, and then maybe you have other communities that decide to be responsible consumers of meat or what have you.
I think, yeah, I don't feel comfortable mandating people's food choices, whether it's about health, whether it's about meat, or really anything, as long as they're not eating like other people. It is such a personal decision, and there's so many factors to it. Like, yeah, I think we should create a system that overall gives people better access to fresh produce and ethically farmed and produced fruit and veg and meat.
Yeah, and here's the thing, too, is you're going to have, by default, less meat consumption if you're doing away with, like, factory farming and stuff. And if you're democratizing everything, and, like, if it's the commune or the worker state or what have you that is organizing things, they're not going to be organizing things in a factory farm, agribusiness sort of way. And so you're just straight up not going to have as much meat and stuff available. And the types that you do are going to be a la Joel's farm and everything. They're going to be like grown like that. Or if you have a commune that, they maybe they want to incorporate into their whole community, we're going to start these organic, small scale, good for the earth ranches and stuff for our livestock that we're going to consume.
Yeah, because to me, that goes back to Joel's point about transparency, is that if you had a commune, like the way animals suffer in these meat production facilities, that wouldn't happen because like it's such a closed system now. Like, if all of those were publicly run facilities, you wouldn't be shooting cows in the head with a bolt that mostly kills them and sometimes doesn't. That wouldn't be happening.
Mm-hmm. If people even like had a more visceral experience in terms of like looking at their meat in more animal-like ways.
Oh yeah, because it's all prepackaged now.
Yeah, if they didn't think it was just this like clean little, just falls off the chicken breast, I
hate when people don't eat meat with bones in it, and I'm like, get over it. I mean, if you have a sensory issue, fine, but like people will do that. They'll be like, oh, it's too much like the animal, and I'm like, it's an animal, guys. Yeah,
that's what you're doing. But yeah, I mean, I get it if that's your preference, you do you. But I think that by and large would have an impact too. Is having a more in touch with. Now I sound like the 70s organic people, but having a more in touch relationship with your food as It relates to the earth as it relates to, in terms of animal products, the animal that it comes from. You would have a greater appreciation for it and less just simple demand, because, a lot of people, when they're talking about, oh, I do want meat available, they're not talking about like, oh, I want to make sure that I'm actually caring for the animal or whatnot. Like, however much they may say, it's more often like, I just want like meat available to eat when I want, rather than thinking through the whole system and appreciating what that took for the animal to provide that for you.
Yeah, because the system is so hidden away from us, like it's a cognitive dissonance of like, yes, but meat good, because we don't see that connection from factory farms to table. It's just hidden.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit more about animal suffering, a great cheery topic. There's people who, talking about capacity for intelligence are like, well, can they even suffer on the same level or a similar level to humans? I mean, the short answer is they definitely can suffer. They can have a short memory for pain in certain situations, like castration. You can castrate and then they'll kind of go back to normal. But if you think about an animal's experience, like, you can't explain what you're doing to them. Like, they just like have to trust you. You can't prepare them for any pain that's coming. They don't understand the concept of death or non-existence, which probably is cool in some ways.
Yeah.
But I mean, at the end of the day, like all these arguments about like, okay, who is intelligent enough to not be killed or whatever, our system as it stands is undeniably cruel. Like, we should not be doing this to any living creatures. I'm going to give kind of the highlights. If you have the stomach for reading more into it, like, there are lots of resources out there on it. My notes have a few more details, but just kind of the overall state of these creatures is, overcrowded, sick, and miserable. Egg operations are some of the worst. They are so crowded that they can lead to cannibalism, and they get scarred from the mesh that they're rubbing up against all day. 10% of hens just die, which is factored into the cost of production. There's like, yeah, we're going to lose 10% of them.
Damn.
Probably the most horrible part is, I don't know, there's a lot of horrible parts, but one of them that stuck out to me is when chickens, when they begin to decline their egg output, they starve them, basically forcing them to eject all the remaining eggs from their body before they die.
Is that for eggs, organic eggs, cage-free eggs?
I'm not sure on the regulations. I imagine organic is, again, like we talked about most of the time, it's the letter of the law of, they're eating organic corn.
Yeah.
So I think pollen visits an organic operation. It's pretty similar. Like they get like a few more inches of room, but it ain't much better.
Yeah. Okay.
I think this quote is really telling. The industrial animal factory offers a nightmarish glimpse of what capitalism is capable of in the absence of any moral or regulatory constraint whatsoever. It is no accident that the non-union workers in these factories receive little more consideration than the animals in their care.
And yeah, no, I mean, if it comes down to it and they've automated everything and they've even found a way to fake the demand end of the curve too, and we're all just superfluous, we'll probably find ourselves in some sort of human version of the chicken coop there.
I mean, yeah, full on Matrix level shit.
Yeah.
It's not far with the fucking metaverse. So cows, we talked about some of the conditions last episode, but just a few slaughterhouse details. I mentioned the bolt that they use, like it's a pneumatic bolt they shoot into their head. Occasionally, some of them will still be alive, like on the processing floor, so they have to like go take them out. Another example I think that is like really telling of the output-oriented mindset of capitalism is pigs, and a process of tail docking. So pigs are weaned very early so they can fatten more quickly. This causes them to bite at each other's tails because they like have an oral fixation. Because they are in such cramped quarters and, are inside all day, they're depressed. And so a pig will not fight off another pig when they bite their tail, and that tail can become infected. So the solution is to dock the tail. This is often mostly done without anesthetic.
Is this cutting off the tail?
Docking, yes, is cutting off the tail.
All right.
So it's a little nub now. Now you may think, okay, great, no more tail, no more problem, right?
Yeah.
The real intention behind that is to make the remaining tail so sensitive that even a very depressed pig will fight off any pig that bites him. So it actually causes the pig more pain.
It's like they constantly have this easily irritated spot now.
Yeah, now if another pig bites their tail, it'll hurt like fucking hell.
Wow.
Like, that's just so horrible. Like, you've put the animal in a more vulnerable position instead of just like looking at your operation of like, man, maybe I should make less depressed pigs. No, we're going to do this fucked up thing to them.
Yeah. There's still, that with that one, there's also a lot of parallels. What if we just had people like work less and have like better lives and stuff? No,
we're not doing that. and you mentioned, even on Joel's farm, they're gonna have to die eventually. And, is that okay? I think some animal rights activists would say no, because they're still dying, you're still killing them, that's still bad. It's essentially a nice life before the slaughter. Here's the thing, I think it's better. I think we can all agree. That sounds, if a pig literally gets to play and shit all day, the thing pigs like to do, that seems like the way to go. If we are on track to keep domestic animals in existence, I think this is the route to do it humanely, or at least should be part of the consideration.
Do you think it may be like a stage thing? Like, okay, abolish the horrific conditions that we now have, turn them all into happy farms, let them, go through their normal life cycle so that they're not biting everyone's tail, and do that, and then maybe gradually say, okay, you think we're to that point yet? Then let's, not exploit animals at all.
I think, once we get into, more of the Star Trek side of communism, if you got a replicator, you can just make meat. you know?
Yeah.
And eventually, we won't need to farm anymore, which would be cool.
And all along, people can kind of tell us, and I think this is fine, and they can say, well, you really don't need to anyway. And you're probably right, to be honest. But humans, we're also kind of weak in some ways. We have desires that we want, and we try to fulfill. And you don't need like Rice Krispie treats, but they're good.
Yeah, I mean, my Venus is in Taurus. I'm an indulgent person.
But the difference there, I guess, is your Rice Krispie treats. They do rely on the suffering of the exploitation of the workers that made them, but they don't rely on killing anything necessarily. So,
I mean, killing the environment, but whatever. We're all doing that. Yeah. But speaking of exploitations, I think it's important to talk about the working conditions in these operations. They're horrifying. I've got some stats here. In a report by Oxfam America, slaughterhouse workers were observed not being allowed breaks, often required to wear diapers, and were paid below minimum wage. A lot of these operations work on migrant labor, so they can do all these things to them with no consequences. American slaughterhouse workers are 3 times more likely to suffer serious injury than the average American worker. Oh, this one's horrible. The Guardian reports that on average there are 2 amputations a week involving slaughterhouse workers in the United States.
Wow, that's a significantly more dangerous job than, say, being a cop.
Yeah, right? Like, fuck, that's got to be way more dangerous.
Yeah. Wow.
Tyson, who already got a shout out earlier, largest meat producer in America. On average, 1 employee of theirs is injured and is amputated either a finger or limb per month.
Their days since last amputation sign just
it's always
stays,
like 30.
Yeah. They don't have like a third digit on there at all on their little...
They've never gotten there.
Yeah.
Ugh. And also there's a big psychological impact. Often full-time slaughterhouse workers become kind of sadistic. You're hired to kill animals, things that are, gentle. Pigs and cows, will come up to you and nuzzle you, and then you have to kill them. And there's a lot of emotional dissonance, and so you see high rates of domestic violence, social withdrawal, anxiety, drug and alcohol abuse, and PTSD.
Yeah, I was thinking about that as we were describing this. It does sound like it is a difficult job to do emotionally. Probably not one we want to put anyone through the commune, in the commune through. We don't want to put them through that. Having to do that to provide for people, it seems like it kind of sucks.
Yeah, and that's the thing is like when you operate these scales, you're required to do that because demand is so high. But if you are in a society where, meat is less common and you are not working at these massive industrial scales, you can afford to rotate people out of that position potentially. That's one thing like Joel really emphasizes on his farm is that this is low scale because like I want us to think about what it means to kill a chicken, and like we can't, like if I had to scale up, someone would have to do this every day, and that's not good for them. So I think we have to take that into consideration too.
Yeah, I don't know. That makes me think more along the lines of like, it's not good for him, man. Should we make him do it once?
Yeah, that's a good point. Like maybe it's just not worth it at the end. And, I think and then I think we have to wrestle with maybe cows and chickens don't exist anymore. Or we let the remaining ones die off of old age or something.
Yeah. I don't know. I liked my idea of stagism earlier of like.
I like that too. I think that's really smart.
Do one then the other. Maybe it probably has a fatal flaw that I'm not thinking of.
Well, hey, what'll make you feel better is I basically wrote the same thing in my next section, which is called Now What?
All right.
Now that we've bummed you out. I basically broke it down into what I consider, short-term individual steps, kind of the medium term and then longer term stuff. So individually, if you personally are really affected by this information and you're like, fuck, I gotta change the way I eat, feel free to do that, or don't. It's okay. If you're interested, you can do things like joining a CSA, which is a community-supported agriculture. Basically, it's like a subscription service to a local grower. I used to live in Denton, and they had one in there that was pretty cool. It's seasonal cooking. You'll get turnips every week for a few months, and then you'll get whatever, and like it's pretty cool.
Huh. Okay.
There's also, obviously shopping at farmers markets and really looking for those kinds of foods that are grown responsibly, things like that. Like we've talked about, eating less meat, probably a good idea environmentally and maybe for you ethically as well.
Yeah, and it's, no shade if it's not. Like
it's cool if it's not.
Different people have different ways about it. I'm someone who agonizes about it. We were just talking the other day how I tend to let guilt get to me more than other people. So maybe that's part of it.
I'm a shithead. We both had very different responses to being raised Catholic. I ejected that guilt out of my body as soon as I realized I could. I was like, oh, fuck yeah. It's gone.
I think it makes me more reflective. I don't know. It forces me to be more reflective when I otherwise wouldn't.
Well, I had a very too guilty relationship with it when I was younger. So I was like, well, I'm going to stop now.
Yeah, no, it makes sense.
Okay. Some kind of slightly more ambitious ideas, if you want to take some steps, would probably be to join or start a community garden or a community fridge or mutual aid in general, finding a way to provide food for your area. I'd also note that community fridges often are in desperate need of fresh food instead of just canned. So if you're doing that, do that.
Yeah, yeah.
Longer term stuff, I mean... I think we both have been talking about it. We got to get rid of capitalism, guys. I don't know about y'all, but...
We got to seize the means of production.
Yada, yada.
Yeah, however you do it. Do it through the labor unions. We got the Starbucks unions happening. We got the Amazon unions happening. It's happening, it's kicking off in different places. And hey, maybe it, collapses here in a little while. We're used to that, but maybe it doesn't. Take off that way, or... just fucking do the damn thing with anarcho-communism, or put together your Vanguard party. Do whatever, but take it over.
However you want to get there.
we gotta get rid of the bastards that are marching us toward climate extinction.
And I think that was my big takeaway from what I wanted it to be the big takeaway, at least from these episodes. So maybe I failed at it, but basically, as long as profit/yield is the goal, our food system will remain fucked. It will remain fucked in all of the different ways we have talked about, ethically, environmentally, health-wise, just just bad. It'll be bad.
Yeah. I think you did a good job of explaining that, because we raised it several times. It's like, hey, but what about efficiency? And we just kind of have to say, like, yes, if your yardstick is capitalist efficiency, keep doing what you're doing until we're all dead.
Yeah, you're
going to
doing
be
great.
efficient up until the point that the planet boils. And this system cannot be asked to be nice and get away from that, because it's like systemically impossible for it to do so.
No, I mean, they're beholden to their system of profit.
It's like in Futurama, where they trot out the vegans come out and they're like, we taught this lion to eat tofu.
Yeah, that's hilarious.
The lion cannot do that. Capitalism cannot just say, oh, never mind, we're not going to be efficient. Like, it has to do that. So yeah, like, capitalism is not going to be nice to you unless they see some sort of other angle they can play at it. But it's not going to change the overall, this huge food system, this complicated thing that is built. That's not just going to change because, we passed some regulations or something. Like, we have to take the wheel away from them, break the wheel or take it or whatever. They can't be driving this whole thing.
For sure. We got to push them out of the car.
Yes, at high speeds.
Absolutely.
Or reformist. Maybe we'll slow down a little bit before we push them out. Either way.
Yeah, we come to a rolling stop and shove them out.
Like in Americans, where they like dive out of the
Oh, they're always jumping out of cars.
Yeah.
Quick note before I forget. If you're asking, Christine, there is a whole section of this book you didn't cover. That's because Michael Pollan goes hunting and he gets really poetic about it, and we don't really need to hear about it.
Okay, so hunting is inspirational.
Cool mushroom facts in that chapter.
Some fun. I couldn't figure it out.
Oh no, don't.
Some fun guy facts.
Yes, okay, you did it. Are you proud of yourself?
No.
Okay, good. But yeah, if you're interested in that stuff, I mean, it's very nice writing. It made me get very emotional about an almond croissant I was eating, but I mean, that's all really it did for me.
All right.
I was like, food is important. But that was it. I did have a question for you, though.
Okay.
This was actually inspired by a recent Trillbillies episode where they talked about urbanism. I think this is on their Patreon feed. I'm not super sure. But I was thinking how we usually set our utopian kind of ideas or projects, and we did this with our playing of The Quiet Year. We usually set those things in cities because, it's easier to distribute. It's more efficient. You can say, okay, everyone live in this one building and we'll heat it. How do we deal with populations that are more spread out and want to remain that way?
How do we deal with them in terms of overarching food system?
Food system, but you could apply it to really anything where you are trying to be more productive,
You'd still have to rely.
This is a big question.
No, I mean, I think you'd still have to rely on essentially villages, which most rural areas have some place that, they can do that with. I mean, so you'd have to distribute electric vehicles or something to them.
Some sort of transportation.
Yeah, we've done the work in, I'm thinking about in America, and maybe this isn't the case in most places, but in large portions of the world, we've done the work of electrification. So even in rural areas, you do have electric generation. So all you have to do is wave your magic wand, and you have and then you have renewable energy generating that electricity, so it's green. So you're good.
Boom. Done. This isn't even hard, you guys.
Yeah, once you do that, you have to distribute electric vehicles, including like big ass farm style ones, because you got to do ranching things or whatever, not just like jacked up trucks for the city, but real ass pickup trucks and stuff and semis and whatnot. Okay, so you have to distribute that because those people do need to get around on their, farm to market roads and stuff. They're too far apart to rely on public transportation for most things.
Yeah, if they want to go visit their friend in the city, they definitely can. But I think you're right. Yeah. I think you are still going to have some people at the end of the day, even if we make our city really nice and walkable and beautiful and green and all those things, you're still going to have some people who are like, no, I want to live out in the country. I want to be myself. And that's fucking fine.
Yeah, I think so. I do note that Marx said in the Communist Manifesto, I want to say, and there may have been something in Engels's principles of communism, about the elimination of the distinction between the city and the country.
Yeah, I remember that. I think Kropotkin did a whole section too on okay, how does this apply to rural stuff? Like, can they work together? Stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So it's a common problem.
Yeah, and I think they were kind of saying maybe it ends up getting blended together eventually or evened out. And it could. I mean, that's one route. I don't see a problem with like allowing that as long as it's in your network and not like, it's not just like, hey, let those assholes do something, like
a total separatist movement.
Right. Like you would want it to be, okay.
I've still federated in some way.
Yeah. And they have connections to the cities and stuff nearby. Like you would want to run train lines and stuff to the village centers that we're talking about, the little hamlets. You'd want to have stops there in your mass transit, not to every farm, obviously, but like to the local little areas. And then they have their vehicles to get there to what they need to do. You'd have to coordinate shipments between, like you were saying, the federations or the different, socialist republics or however you're doing it. You'd have to have that. I don't know. You'd have more of a
symbiotic relationship, maybe?
Yeah, because I think the cities would be way more sustainable in terms of not just like being, leeching off of the countryside so much, So the countryside would be like more producing for itself and self-sufficient in its way. And there'd be trade back and forth, but it's not like that they're kind of paying tribute to the urban centers.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking about too. Because like if we think about an operation like Joel Salatin's farm, that's like 400 acres total because he includes the woodlands in that. That requires a lot of room. Like city agriculture is only going to get us so far.
Well, and there's the Kropotkin sort of intensive thing. If there can be a way to do that that's not ecologically disastrous, then that would be.
Everyone take your cat shit down to the the community garden. We all walk our dogs in the community garden so they can poop in it. We make our own rotational agriculture in the city.
Yeah, there you go.
I mean, that's you could compost though. I'm just saying.
Yeah, that's true.
It's not that crazy.
And that was just, we were just thinking food production maybe, but like you do have to integrate that into the whole system of transportation, but like healthcare, okay. So you have to maintain local medical clinics at those villages, maybe like helicopter ambulances and stuff like that, which, I mean, they can run on maybe a very small fraction of all the gasoline that we used to burn in the cars will be burning in that, but it's fine. Because
it's only that.
Yeah. So, you have to, there's all these different things that you kind of have to
allocation.
Find a pretty inconvenient solution for, I feel like, compared to just moving everybody to the one, base number one over here, or city number one. But I don't know. I feel like you're right that probably people will desire that. And maybe it's another instance of two stages of we start out doing that and then gradually we kind of transition to a more whole planet, because we got to be thinking totally in the future now, right? Whole planet sort of planning of where are people going to live? How are we going to do all this,
Yeah. And that's the thing is my anarcho streak does not want to mandate where people can live, because I think that's pretty fucked. Like, I think there's a genuine value to being out in nature and like being in a small town. Like some people fucking love that. It's not my bag, but I get it.
What? Yeah.
I am not a nature boy. No, I am an inside cat. No, that's just something I think we should think about moving forward. Like I would love to replay A Quiet Year like in a rural setting and see how hard that is.
Ooh, yeah.
All right. That's actually all I have. I wanted to end us with some country mouse and city mouse discussion.
Yeah. All right. That was great.
Great. Yeah. I think food production is such a common tripping point that it's important to talk about.
Yeah. And we kind of thought through some of the downsides, but some of the kind of criticisms that the left gets about this sort of thing is like, well, you silly little dreamers, you haven't thought through problem X, Y, or Z, So hopefully that gives you a little something to chew on between now and the next time your capitalist buddies come up and say, hey, well, those farms feed a lot of people, you know. Or what about bacon? It tastes good, you know.
Like, don't you want a cheap hamburger? It's like, well, yeah, but I also want other things.
Yeah.
What are we doing next week?
Next week, we'll be talking about Hawaii and how it became U.S. territory.
I bet that was bad. That's my prediction.
It had a little something to do with friend of the show, imperialism.
With special guest Dole, right?
Yeah, special guest, lots of business interests, so...
Weird how those guys always hang out together. Business and imperialism, super weird.
It's almost like they're the same guy with like a glasses
mustache.
and a mustache thing. Yeah.
Exactly.
All right, so it'll be fun.
Yeah, great fun.
All right, see you later.
All right, bye.
Bye.
Hey there, comrades. Just jumping in to remind you of all of our social media. We are on Twitter at teachcommunism, Instagram at teachmecommunism. You can shoot us an email. That's teachmecommunism@gmail.com. Any of those places are good to send us an episode suggestion or a question, anything you think would be useful feedback for us, or just your admiration. If you want to admire us in a public manner, and you should, you can go to Apple Podcasts to give us a review. It is the best way to help people find the show. Love when people rate and review us. Please do both. We are also on YouTube, if that's how you prefer to listen to podcasts, or if you know someone that's the only way they'll listen to podcasts, send them to our page. And we have a Patreon. For $5 a month, you get access to our notes for each week's episode, including the backlog of notes, which is a very handy resource for up-and-coming commies. And at the end of the year, all of the funds from Patreon will be given to local mutual aid in the DFW area. So, ain't going to line our pockets. Finally, we have merch. Check us out at TeePublic. You can find shirts and I believe also stickers and magnets and all kinds of fun stuff with catchphrases from the show or episode art, stuff like that. The link to that store is in the show notes, so check that out. Okay, that's all the internet. Join us next time for another episode of Teach Me Communism, where the class struggle is always in session. Bye, y'all.